Hi, and welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm your host, Tiffanie DeVan, and today I am excited to have with me one of my favorite people, one of my young scholars, Quartay Brannon, Mr. Quartay Brannon, soon to be college graduate. And so today he's going to give us a student's perspective, and I'm going to call it Through the Eyes of a Scholar. So thank you for joining us today at the Higher Education Access Corner.
No problem.
All right, so just to get everything kicked off, because I do know you just a little bit, I want to share a couple things that I've learned about you, and then we'll kick into the episode topics specifically. I remember meeting you for the first time with your grandmom. Your grandmom and I did a volunteer thing, and she had me with her doing one of the Positive Images youth mentoring programs. Right. And you were with her. I don't remember the age, but you were very young. And so you were hanging around doing all kinds of stuff and so engaging. And you were just like you were just a deer, right? And I remember asking you that one question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And you threw me, because I don't know any little kids who wanted to be what you wanted to be. So just to start out, what did you want to be, so that our listeners can hear when you grew up?
A funeral director.
Funeral director.
Yes. And
what led to that? What inspired you at such a young age to say, I want to be a funeral director?
Well, I knew it was a calling. I knew that I had the traits and the characteristics of a funeral director. I just never knew it was a real thing until, you know, we go to family funerals and we bury family friends and things like that. I was more so thrilled with how the final look was. You know, you have the person laying there, looks sleep, beautiful. But I was always the one to think, how did we get them to get to that point? How did we get them to look as natural as they did? And so I did a little bit of research on it, and when I actually knew it was a thing, it kind of clicked. So I did that since I was 7. Okay,
and I was going to ask you, did you remember the age where it first dawned on you? It was 7.
Was 7.
Was 7 years old. And what I found fascinating is that throughout your years of me connecting with you, whether it was from, you know, my experiences with you with your grandmother, to seeing you out in the communities, to you being in school, and me talking to you just about what we do here at FIA, it never changed, and you were always working towards that particular path. So you mentioned that you felt like you had some of those traits. What are some of the traits that a funeral director would have?
You have to have a heart. Because it's a ministry, as we've talked about, because people come to you at their lowest time, and you have to have that empathy and sympathy for that particular family, but not only the family, but the surviving loved ones, and even that deceased person, because everybody deserves to be treated with dignity. And you have to have integrity, because there's going to be a time where no eyes are going to be on you, and the family has entrusted their loved one and their services to you, and if you fail them, that's not a good look. Being able to relate to them, being an open ear, because at the end of the day, you're a counselor. It's not about the money. It's not about anything beyond that. It is about serving this particular family and the community and having their best interests at heart.
And you taught me that, because I remember when you first said, I want to be a funeral director, I was kind of like, huh? A funeral director? And it shocked me for 2 reasons. Number one, you were so young when you said that. And number 2, you know, when people think of funeral homes, funeral directors, it seems so dark and morbid. And I was like, what would make you do that? And you said, it's the ministry behind it. It's the passion, it's the love, it's the caring. And I had never once looked at that profession in that manner. Do you know what I mean? So that was the beauty, I think, and what you were able to show to me. Like, you don't close off a particular profession until you really understand what it's about and how you can be best used for it. So I think that's a great profession for you now that I know who you are and why you wanted to do that. Was there something else that helped to influence your decision as you got older to say, this is definitely where I want, or someone?
There's no one in my family that does it. We know family friends that have been in the business for a while. But just the overall impact that it has on that particular family. I would say more so the business itself, the ministry part of it, was what drove me to want to do it. But no particular person, but I will say I had people in my corner that actually believed in me and drove that idea and that fire in me, which is more like my grandma, my mom, uncles, relatives, because it does truly take a village. And that village was strong for me. And those people is who I pay homage to because they actually believed in me and pushed me to, become the best I could be at funeral directing. So
pretty good. So now let's talk about this part. Explain your journey to me. How did you prepare? So you knew at a young age you wanted to do it, and I know now that you are literally about to graduate, like in a day. Graduation day is when?
Next Thursday.
So it's
the 9th.
The 9th. So we're recording now for the 8th. So when our viewers hear this, you have one day for graduation from there, right? So throughout your whole journey, how did you actually prepare to get to where you are right now?
Well, number one, when I left Camp Curtin, I was in 8th grade Camp Curtin. I applied to Sci Tech, and then I applied to DC Tech. And my mom was more forceful on going to Sci Tech because it was a STEM school. Whereas DC Tech was more like a trade, hands-on.
Right.
And so I said, well, I'll go to Sci Tech, but at first I did not get in.
Okay.
And so they give you a chance to appeal. They didn't care about any relationships, and I didn't either. But at that time, we appealed, went through the whole process. I ended up getting in. It was just a glitch in the system.
Okay.
So I got in, and from that day on, 9th grade year, I went into high school wanting to be a general surgeon. And so we did a college board, and you laid out your whole career, giving fun facts about your career. And I was doing it, and I said, 8 years beyond my undergrad? And I said, oh, no, I can't do that. And so it brought back the thought of funeral directing. And so I talked to one of my teachers at the time, Miss Cornfeld, and she was like, that's an actual thing. She gave me the name. I looked up, did research, and I said, well, that's what I want to do. And so that brought back the fire. I just kind of pushed it aside because I was like, I don't really think I want to do that. So then my 10th grade year, I started my internship. I think I was about 15. I started my first internship here.
How did you get it? Did you pursue it? Did you reach out to them? Because you have a lot of students who might be listening and they might be interested in taking on an internship while they're still in high school. How did you do it?
I reached out to the 3 African American funeral homes here. I started at Hooper Memorial Home. And that was my first internship. And so I learned a lot there. And then another opportunity arose at another funeral home. Took that opportunity there to learn, and then another opportunity came for the 3rd. And so that's where I'm currently at now. And it's not to brag or anything, it's just that you can learn something from everybody. And I always tell students, don't limit yourself, because if you limit yourself on knowledge. You can learn something from everybody, and we're all in this together.
Right.
Granted, there's respective businesses and everything of that nature, but at the time, the student trying to learn, I'm 15 years at that time, trying to learn the business, trying to get exposed to different things and learn, you have to take, seize all opportunities, and that's what I did. So I started that in 10th grade year. My 11th grade year came. I was still in the business. 12th grade came. At that time, my 11th grade year, I started taking courses at Harrisburg University. And so Harrisburg University, I took my first business course, and then I took my, it was intro to business, and then it was a science, biology. I did biology, and that was what really kick-started my scientific, I guess you could say, learning. So then I ended up graduating. It was a pandemic year. I was going away to college, and when the pandemic happened, I had to really weigh a lot of finances. I remember when you would come to the school, you're like, you don't want to graduate with a lot of debt. So that was my whole thing. So I took that into consideration, and HU Harrisburg University had offered me a really hefty scholarship to where I didn't have to pay much, out of my pocket. Granted, I had to consider mortuary school, which I would be doing after graduating. So I just seized the opportunity. And
so let's stop. I want to pause for a second because you mentioned a couple things that I want to go back to. So we were talking about your journey and what led you there, and you gave us that good stuff. For that student who's trying to figure out what it is they want to do, because you found your passion, you found your lane of where you want to go. For that student who has absolutely no idea what it is that they want to do, any advice for them?
First of all, do some research on things that you like to do. If you like being in, let's just say, a health field, some people like going to the doctors because it makes them feel as though, I don't know, something that they like there. Maybe it's the soap, the gloves, putting on gloves, things like that. If you like to do that, why not look into something that you can get paid for, number one, or as a career aspiration? That's definitely important. I would say look at the people in your life or in the community and think about, could you see yourself doing that? Could you see yourself maybe speaking in public, being in politics, defending someone in law, things like that. So
start with the interest.
Start with the interest.
Yep. And a lot of times we talk to students like this all the time. Start with the things you like. What do you like versus what you dislike?
Right.
Because there are going to be career clusters that are in there. And then you can narrow it down to the specific job that's out there. But can you imagine yourself getting up every day going to this job?
Right.
The one thing I always tell people, there's nothing worse than that person that says, oh my goodness, Monday is coming and you have to go to work. And it's not that you just have to get up and go outside. It's you don't like your job.
Right.
And so you find the dream job if you can. And I always say, what's your dream job? It's the job where, you're doing what you love. Right. You're good at that skill set, or you can learn to be good at it. You can acquire the skill set and you can get paid for doing it. You can find something that encompasses all three. I think you've kind of found a good dream job. And students are so young right now, you have time to do the research, to do the internships. And that's why I wanted you to talk about that. You took a chance in high school and you got a chance to see what they were doing inside the industry. Now, of course, I'm sure you weren't able to see everything up front at 15 years of age, but it kind of gives people an idea of saying, okay, I see what they're doing and be able to pivot before they spend much more time and much more money and resources in a specific field. Because they can say, you know what, I like this, or this is not for me. So it could go both ways. I'm glad it went the way that it's going for you with it all. So hopefully students who are listening to you, if they're not learning anything at this point, it's about the career exploration. You explored some different opportunities.
Right.
You talked to people in the industry. And the other thing is, even if you didn't get the internships, you were connected to people in the industry. You could have asked them, what do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? And maybe you did. What things do I need to do to prepare? And those are things that I think you do well because you talk to so many students all the time.
Right.
I know you go back to SciTech, and I don't know if you're at other schools, but and you do Boys and Girls Club as well. So you are you're a role model, and you're amongst your peers. You're a role model amongst adults, and even for the younger generation. So I applaud you, for that, for everything that you're doing and you're showing them. So another thing I wanted to talk about is you were talking about the school. So you were talking about what factors you were looking at in order to choose a school. And there are so many different options to choose from. So you chose, you were saying, and you were starting to say, based some on cost, some location.
Right.
Of course, the pandemic was going on for you, so that was very unique. Hopefully, we never have to experience that again. But your choices and your experiences were molded a lot by what happened during the pandemic. So let's get back to when it came to choosing a school. When you were saying, you settled on, I don't want to mean settle in a bad way, but you chose Harrisburg University because you felt like that was the best fit for you. But were there any other factors as far as location, cost, or any other factors that you think were key or that a student should look into or that you did look into to help you make your decision?
Number one was culture and diversity. Harrisburg University was a growing university, and it had a mix of every ethnicity and every race, in the sense of it wasn't strictly majority African American students. It was, you had Asian, you had Indian, you had white Americans, African Americans. It was more diverse. It was in our backyard. It was a hidden treasure, and I wanted to shed a light on that because it is an evolving university, but it's a very strong and on solid ground university. So even looking beyond Harrisburg University, looking at my other colleges that I was accepted into and going and choosing, narrowing down my list, because I had about 10 to 12 universities that I was accepted into. Some were HBCUs, some were predominantly white institutes. I looked at their culture. I looked at the sense of belonging that the African American student had there, or any race at that time, or per that person. I looked at how the students congregated in the sense of how receptive they were to different cultures, different aspects, different how they hold themselves, amongst other peers and classmates, because like we talked about, you can visit a university and it just be a good day that day, but go on a day that everybody's not there,
right?
And on a normal day, and actually be observative, and actually observe what is going on around there.
Right, and we did talk, I want to say, because everyone didn't hear, they don't know all of our discussions that we've had, but one of the things we were talking about was whether or not you had an opportunity to visit some of the campuses that you went to. Because researching the schools to decide, or for you to figure out, what's it like, what's the culture like, what's the feel like, will I feel, valued, seen, heard, included, what are the classroom size like? They can tell you all of that on their websites. They can tell you that if you do a tour. And if you tour a school, I think when it's like a day where everybody's coming in, they are bringing out all the bells and whistles, right?
That's right.
So it looks real good. But what happens on a normal school day? So I think if students have an opportunity to visit the schools just on a regular day, it gives you a better picture of what it's going to be like if you're on that particular campus.
Absolutely.
If they have the opportunity to sit in on any classrooms, sit in on those classes. See what that ratio is like between the professor and the student, and how accessible are they to them? What's the student services like? So I'm mentioning all these extra things just for the student who might be listening, but I know you and I have talked about those things. And I think what's beautiful is that you did take the time to kind of already know, whether you put it on paper or was all in your head, to know what these are the things that are important to me. And you kind of just were laying them out. These are your top 5, top 10 things that are really important to me when I'm choosing a school, and you found a school that worked for you.
Right.
And I think everyone needs that list.
Yeah, and going back to that ratio, that is certainly important. Harrisburg University had a 1 to 12, which is 1 professor to every 12 students. I can't remember having any more than 12 to 15 kids in my classroom setting, because one of the things that they prided themselves on, and which I feel every university should, is having their professor available. Because at the end of each course, you have a course eval, and they ask how accessible was that professor, how was that professor emailing you back on time. That plays a part into the journey that you have academically at whatever university you choose, because at the end of the day, they're there to work for you, and teach you and mold you to who you become. Right.
You're paying for this, right?
You're paying for it.
They're getting paid for this, so you want to make sure that you get everything that you're supposed to get from that. Let them be accessible. Hold you accountable as well, to get your work done and be the resource that they need to be. So I'm glad you bring that up as well. So for you, you feel like you made the best choice with everything?
Yes.
No regrets?
I wouldn't say no regrets. The only regret I would probably have was actually going away and taking the chance.
Okay.
But at that time, it wasn't really a second thought. More so, it was more of the pandemic we didn't know anything about. We didn't really know how to navigate through it. But I felt I made a greater impact staying here.
And when you're saying going away, you mean actually taking the opportunity to go away to a different school at one point, right? And then you came back home.
Different scenery was my whole big regret. But I said, my friends was up at Cheney. I have a friend at Lincoln. And we have friends down in Virginia State. I have people everywhere.
So you can travel.
So I can
and
travel.
You can go.
So I can still get the experience with at a fraction of the cost.
Yep.
You know? So that regret went out my head very easily because I looked at my financial aspect as well, because I don't want to be paying on education for the rest of my life. You know? So, but all is well. Everything worked out. The end goal is met, and that is graduation.
It is.
So.
But before we talk about that, another thing I want to bring up, because again, I have seen you. One thing I love about you is that you have no problem speaking your mind. Right. You advocate for yourself. You stand up for yourself. If it's something you believe in, you support it. You show up. You're very vocal, and you're out there in your community, and that's something I love about you. For how important is advocacy to you in your community, just for yourself? And for that student or that young student who hasn't found a voice, any tips for them on, why it's important to advocate? And just for yourself alone, besides the things that are important to you in your community, any advice you could give to that person who's a little afraid because they're not sure how they're going to be perceived or the opportunity they may miss out on? If you don't advocate for yourself, who else will, right?
Well, as the saying goes, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
say that again.
If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that is absolutely true. But we, as people, have to advocate for ourselves, because if not, who will? Mm-hmm. We can't entrust our future to anyone else. Mm-hmm. We can't entrust our livelihood to anyone else. Mm-hmm. We have to be the person and the voice for ourselves. Mm-hmm. But not only for ourselves, but for our community. Mm-hmm. We see it now with the situation that happened across the river at Central Dauphin. Mm-hmm. And we as a community have to come together and rally around for not only that aspect, but in the aspect of the entire well-being of our culture and community. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is very important. We have to stand up for ourselves.
So your beliefs have to be heard, right?
Yes.
And change doesn't happen unless you stand up.
Right.
You make your voices heard, but then you follow through.
You have to follow through.
Something I've learned, that's just how I grew up. Speak up for yourself, speak up for your community, for those who don't have a voice. You know how they say you be the voice for the voiceless?
Yes.
But then you have to put some action behind it.
Yes.
Another thing that I love, I don't know if you ever had a choice in learning to do this, because your grandmom, again, one of my favorite people, that's something she's always been big on, and she's always stood behind, standing up and being a voice for the voiceless under so many different things. It doesn't matter if we're talking race relations, if we're talking education, if we're talking about yourself, she's usually there and she's in the forefront. And that's something that I love about her. And you've always been close by her side, right?
So too far.
Yeah, you were never too far. So I love that it's a part of who you are. It's a part of you speaking. And so hopefully I'm hoping that all of our listeners learn that if you're afraid to speak up, there's so many things that you might miss out on and that others may miss out on. And you can be an example for others. You are an example for others. So I applaud you for that and not being afraid to speak up. And it takes courage to do that, and you have that, and I appreciate that in you. And I know that others are watching and others can see that in you. You also do a lot of volunteer work, and you're getting involved, and you're involved in school, you're involved after school, you're involved, you wear a lot of different hats. And how important is it, and how does helping others and being a volunteer impact you? Like, what do you get from that?
That plays a part into molding that particular person and myself. Giving back has to be a part of who you are, because we never can forget where we came from. We have to make the impact first at home before we can do it at large. And so my family, my grandmom and my brothers, we have all been a part of some sense or some form of volunteering or community advocacy. My grandma really prided herself on making sure that we were vocal and that we were seen, number one, but also being able to make that community impact. Make time, because it's just something that you can put on your resume, number one, but also it makes you feel good.
It does. Yeah, really makes you feel good. And I've always been a big proponent of giving back and volunteering, and that's how I met your mom. I met your mom through NCBW, and then she pulled me in through Harrisburg Police Athletic League, and that's where we did the positive imaging mentorship program. But you see her out there in facets all the time, just doing these things, and it does make you feel good when you're just helping others pour out there. And again, it also looks good on the resume, even looking for scholarships. So
Yes.
we talk about scholarships. One of the things that on a lot of scholarship applications they'll ask is, did you do any community service? If
Right.
so, with whom and how many hours?
Right.
You know what? That looks good on that resume.
Well, that's even one of your requirements.
Yeah.
When you graduate high school, you have to put in a certain amount of hours of volunteering. And I actually, thinking back, I reached those hours well before my 12th grade year.
I'm
I
sure.
had to go back and have people sign on them. And even still, I still volunteered. I still did the food bank. I still did my mentorship program that I started at SciTech's campus. And we were, before the pandemic happened, we were trying to have it put up at John Harris. So it plays a part into how well the person is.
I agree, and you mentioned that too. You have a mentorship program as well. So there are a lot of different things that you do. You stay
Right.
busy, you stay active. How do you have time to do all this? Because time management is important. So how do you balance all those things?
I balance it by first putting what is important first. You have to do your schooling, you have to do your work, but you have to make that time for your community.
When do you sleep?
Sometimes if I have a moment during in between, that's the time I sleep.
You sleep.
But sometimes I have to make time for myself on the weekends, sleeping, especially in between my period now that we had to wait to walk. Even before then, I was taking time to rest and just recuperate, but also still being seen. So time management is important. Managing it by, you can plan your days out. I'm a mental planner, so I plan my day or my week out in my mind. So in that way I know this day, this time I'm doing this, that, and the other, and I understand the ripple effect if I don't do it. So it goes back to the person, having that discipline, having that that sense of how to manage your time wisely, in a sense.
So you need discipline?
You need discipline.
And even when you don't feel like doing it, that's where the discipline comes in. It still has to get done, right?
It has to get done.
And you said you're a mental person, so you can put it in your mind to get it done.
Right.
For others, if they can't do it that way, put it on the calendar, right? Do whatever you need to do to match out your day. I am a procrastinator by nature. That's who I am, and I work well under pressure. But that's not something I would recommend to anyone, because if one little thing happens, I'm that person that's not going to get any sleep, right? So I'm that person that says don't follow my path when it comes to that, but I need those tools to kind of keep me on track, and I know that. So because I need have those tools, I know those tools are available, I need to use them. I encourage everybody else to do that.
Right.
Now this is the part that I say is going to be the fun part. You've been on this journey. You've been doing your internships, you've been in school, you've been doing volunteer work, you've been doing advocacy work. You are about to graduate, and one of the things that we talked about was when you graduated from high school, it was during the pandemic.
Right.
So graduation felt different for you. It wasn't the type where you can just get out there and be excited and express it in public because the world was still shut down.
Right.
So you didn't get that graduation ceremony that so many did, and that's kind of a damper, right? So how are we celebrating this year?
And we're celebrating the 2-in-1.
All right.
Yeah, like you said, that the world was shut down when I graduated high school. But now that we have an actual venue, people can come, we can celebrate, and we can be back together. I'm having a graduation party.
All right.
I'll be taking a few trips over summer before I had to start mortuary school in August. So that is how I plan to really just celebrate and relax, kind of let
Gonna be outside this summer.
Yeah, be outside. Because my last 2 summers I did courses in preparation, just trying to get stuff done and stay on track, and that's what I did. So that's how I'll be celebrating.
So you'll be celebrating with a graduation. You're going to walk the stage. Family and friends can come in and celebrate with you, and it's a totally different feel. And I'm happy for you for that, and I'm happy for all the graduates, because again, in 2020 it was a different feel. So for any student who's graduating in 2024 or any year beyond, if they didn't have that moment, then celebrate it, get everything that you absolutely can out of it, and I wish you nothing but success. But what's next? You mentioned mortuary school. How long is that going to take you?
A year and a half.
Year and a half.
Max 2, but since I will go into the program having a degree already, I don't have to do the basic courses. So I would just have to do, I think it's 8 courses to prepare for the national board exam and the state board exam. But the courses are a bit more rigorous than the undergrad, so I have to take it 2 or 3 courses at a time. So that's why it's equaling up to a year and a half. So mortuary school is next, and then after mortuary school, I would likely be in the area practicing for a while before whatever the Lord says go elsewhere, then that's where I'll go. But I'm just enjoying the ride.
I'm excited for you. So this is a genuine smile, not just me interviewing you, because I've seen your journey. I've seen what you wanted at the very beginning, and you held true to it, and you worked it all the way out, and you are succeeding, right?
Yes.
So this is your moment. This is your time. So wherever you land, just know I will be applauding right there, right behind you, saying good job. Continue to do the good work, and I'm going to keep my eye on you because I can't wait to see what is next.
I can't wait either.
Thanks again for joining me on that Higher Education Access Corner. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.